Lorenzo kindly invites Hana to share a meal with him. Surprised and curious, she can't help but ask if he was ever a chef, but he smiles and explains that cooking is just a beloved hobby of his. Teasingly, he warns her that he'll take the food away if she doesn't dig in. Hana finally gives in and admits the food is incredible, a far cry from what she expected from someone she thought was a hardened, gun-toting mobster. Their conversation shifts as Hana brings up someone named Sei, noting the name sounds Korean. Intrigued, she asks if this person might be part of the mafia or perhaps Giulio Parenti's lover. Lorenzo, amused, explains that Sei is a colleague and warns her never to mention the name in front of Julio, as it might provoke him. She then turns the topic to her missing brother, asking if Lorenzo knows anything about him. He flips the question back on her but adds a grim note: Giulio Parenti doesn't keep hostages, he hates the hassle and would rather dispose of them. Concerned, Hana asks if Julio plans to deal with the imposter posing as him. Lorenzo sighs, remarking that imposters are as common as street rats in their line of work. This exchange leaves Hana suspicious that Julio may not truly care about the imposters and might be feigning cooperation for his own purposes. Knowing the intelligence service believes her brother betrayed them, she resolves to stay longer and find proof to clear his name. Leaning back in her chair, she wonders what schemes Julio might be plotting. As they head back, Lorenzo's curiosity gets the better of him, and he asks Hana if she's with the FBI. Her response makes him momentarily regret asking, but she assures him she doesn't mind being questioned. Their light-hearted exchange is interrupted by Julio, who arrives unexpectedly. He jokes about how close they seem, suggesting they might be on a date. Lorenzo, quick to deflect, reminds Julio of Hana's earlier attempt to kill him and quips that she's not his type, he prefers caviar blondes. Hana fires back, claiming Lorenzo isn't her type either. Julio, ever observant, points out that she's still wearing his shirt and tells her to change into something more appropriate because they're heading to a funeral. The rain pours steadily as they prepare to leave, umbrellas in hand. They attend the funeral of a fallen colleague, whose body was recently recovered in Cambodia. Together, they place flowers and bid their final farewells as the hearse carries the casket away. Emotions run high among the mourners, some weep openly, while others struggle to hold back tears. During a quiet moment, Hana recites a prayer in Korean. Julio, intrigued, asks about the language, and she explains it's a traditional funeral prayer, wishing for the deceased to find happiness and freedom from death. After the service and as the rain eases, they gather for a meal. Hana's mind returns to her primary goal, keeping Giulio Parenti's attention. She carefully brings up his suspicions about her, encouraging him to ask whatever he wants. Julio meets her gaze and asks what exactly she wants from him. Her mind races, but she calmly admits she has many desires. Julio, amused, asks her to narrow it down to 3. Hana, with a playful smirk, asks if he'll grant them. Julio, intrigued, replies that it depends on what she's asking for. Hana begins with her first request, help finding her brother, Duty. Her second is to track down whoever targeted him. For her third, she cheekily asks for her own plate of food. Julio, momentarily caught off guard, questions whether the earlier meal wasn't enough for her. Without missing a beat, he orders everyone else to leave, ensuring they have privacy to continue their conversation. Giulio Parenti leans in closer, his voice a quiet blend of curiosity and amusement. The more I think about it, he begins, the more absurd it seems, how little I actually know about you. His tone sharpens as he admits that, despite having a top-tier intelligence officer at his disposal, they've been unable to uncover anything about her. It's as if you're a ghost, he remarks with a wry grin. That grin soon fades as he grows serious, a glint of danger flashing in his eyes. Taming insolent and dangerous creatures like you is my specialty, he declares. To emphasize his point, his hand clamps firmly around her neck, his touch cold and deliberate. The gesture sends a jolt of fear through Hana, a stark reminder of just how unhinged Julio truly is. Swallowing her unease, Hana musters the courage to ask, do you get rid of these creatures once they're tamed? Without mercy? Julio's gaze darkens, his eyes narrowing as he considers her question. The pause is heavy with tension, and she can almost see the cruel fates he envisions for those who dare fake submission. Only those who pretend, he finally responds, his voice laced with quiet menace. Hana begins to grasp the brutal logic that governs him, but the unrelenting grip on her neck continues to unsettle her. Then, his tone shifts again, this time colder. Your bag, he states, was found near the crash site. His eyes bore into hers as he delivers the next blow. Inside was a video of you, Gavin Smith, and your brother. Captured shortly before the explosion. The mention of Gavin Smith sends a chill through her. Julio raises an eyebrow, waiting. What's your connection to him, he demands. The question lands heavily, laden with implications that fill Hana with dread. Her mind races, replaying those moments. Suddenly, a detail she'd missed clicks into place, a man with a limp trailing Dewey. Her brother had been carrying the explosive device, but now she's certain the limping man was an informant for their enemies. The truth strikes her like a thunderclap. The man following Dewey in the video was Gavin Smith. Julio leans back slightly, his voice measured as he delves into Gavin Smith's past. He recounts the former FBI agent's reputation as one of their best, a man who once brought the Red Mafia to its knees, throwing New York City into turmoil. Their own paths had collided in that chaos, with Smith plotting Julio's downfall before disappearing from the Bureau's radar. Now, against all odds, Smith has resurfaced, this time alongside Hana's brother. Hana's relentless questions about Smith's motives earn only a sardonic smirk from Julio. He confesses his paranoia, the weight of constant betrayal leaving him unable to trust anyone, even God. Yet, he can't deny the strange fact that her brother has somehow allied himself with a man devoted to Julio's destruction. His trust in Hana remains precarious, and he warns her, Dewey is likely with Smith right now. Desperate, Hana argues that Smith was protecting her brother, who was clearly in peril. Her conviction intensifies as she snatches a knife from the table. Without hesitation, she draws it across Julio's neck, not deep enough to cause serious harm, but enough to make her point. Her voice is firm as she declares that, like Julio, she values family above all else. She vows to protect her brother at any cost, dismissing the whispers of Dewey's alleged loyalty to the FBI. Julio, unbothered by the cut, regards her with renewed interest. His gaze sharpens as he demands answers, questioning why he should place any trust in her, a woman cloaked in mystery. After a tense pause, Hana concedes, offering him a glimpse of her true identity. She reveals her name, Hana Lee, a mercenary working for an organization called Valentine's Day. She also shares her codename, One, though she doubts Julio recognizes its weight. As she speaks, Julio's curiosity deepens with a dangerous gleam in his eyes. The air between them grows electric as he reaches for her hand, pulling her closer. Without warning, he presses his lips to hers in a fierce, passionate kiss that leaves her shaken. But the moment twists when Hana, regaining her composure, brandishes the knife again. This time, she drives it into Julio's side. His reaction is unexpected, a daring challenge for her to press the blade further. His voice drops to a chilling murmur as he admits something disturbing. He may be developing a sinful obsession with her. Hana shoves him away, her actions making it clear she's not here to kill him. Shortly after, she's restrained and placed in handcuffs. Letting out a tired sigh, she asks if he plans on removing them. His response is cautious but firm. He's sure she could free herself if she wanted, but keeping them on is in her best interest. As the doctor stitches a knife wound nearby, Julio leans closer to Hana, warning her that learning his plans won't help if she decides to run. She silently wonders where she went wrong. She had pegged Julio as just another mobster, easy to manipulate into seeking revenge despite the risks. But now, it's clear she underestimated him. She shifts the conversation, asking about Gavin Smith's whereabouts. Julio assures her he could find him if he wanted. When she presses further, questioning why Smith wants him deceased, Julio casually scratches his neck and admits, Iuna lived his younger brother. Hana feels a surge of emotion but reminds herself not to let Julio rattle her, he's testing her. When she asks about her release, he says it'll happen when he trusts her. Until then, she's his prisoner, and he emphasizes that he can dispose of her if necessary. Lost in thought, Hana realizes she can't just sit around. If the guards watching her are unarmed, maybe she could take them down and escape through a window. But her planning is cut short by the cold press of a gun against her head. A voice warns her to abandon any escape ideas and return to her room. The voice promises respect, but only if she behaves. Julio rummages through Hana's belongings, his fingers pausing on her driver's license. He studies her name for a moment before commenting that he's heard of her, a legendary agent. The first time he saw her, with blood streaked across her face and madness in her eyes, he genuinely thought she was death incarnate, sent to end him. And, strangely, he recalls feeling a sense of release in that moment, as though a part of him wanted her to pull the trigger. Moments later, Romano enters the office with a detailed report. Julio instructs him to track down Logan Valentine's contact information. When Romano asks why, Julio explains that Hana Lee used to work under Valentine. With a cold determination, Julio adds that they have many people to find, and even more to eliminate. Meanwhile, Hana remains locked in the bedroom, her frustration mounting as her shouts for help go unanswered. A full day has passed, and her growing discomfort from needing the bathroom only worsens her anxiety. Just as she debates her next move, the door creaks open, revealing Julio with a smirk. He steps inside, casually observing her. "You seem to be holding up," he remarks, ignoring her disheveled state. Hana, exasperated but determined, assures him she has no plans to run and pleads for him to take off the cuffs, stressing her urgent need for the bathroom. Julio's expression hardens, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that makes her uneasy. Leaning in close, he murmurs, "You're driving me insane." Then, his hands move toward her, his actions crossing a boundary with unsettling deliberation. Hana couldn't be trusted, so her hands were quickly cuffed behind her back. Emerging from the bathroom, she demanded Julio's help with her pants, reminding him that he'd been the one to remove them and should now assist her in putting them back on. Julio raises an eyebrow and asks if she washed her hands. The cuffs made that impossible, but he insists there's a simple solution. Standing before her, he gently helps her wash them himself. Hana can only marvel at the strange turn of events. Then Julio pushes further, teasingly asking if there are larger areas of her body that needs washing. Hana flinches and snaps at him to control his blatant horniness, firmly stating that no amount of charm will convince her to get intimate, her life was too precious to risk. Julio counters, saying he should be the one worried, given she'd tried to stab him during a kiss. Hana, defensive, reminds him that he strangled her first, showing the scars on her body as proof. The tension thickens between them until Hana abruptly stands and storms out of the room. With a sudden, aggressive move, Julio lunges and pins Hana onto the bed. Smirking, he teases her, hinting at a surprise if she plays along. Before she can respond, he pulls out a phone. Hana's eyes lock on it, her mind racing with the possibility that it might hold a message from her brother. Her instincts take over, and she lunges for the phone, but Julio is faster. He slips it back into his pocket, his tone casual yet firm as he advises her to stay cooperative. Frustrated but determined, Hana considers her options, eventually deciding to play his game. She leans in, kissing and caressing him with calculated intent. For a moment, Julio stands motionless, as if weighing her actions. Then, with a faint smile, he steps back and orders her to get dressed. "We have guests downstairs," he says, tossing the key to her handcuffs across the room. "They might just hold the key to your freedom." She begs him for just a moment to check her phone, eager to see the text message. Julio responds with a teasing scold, reminding her she should be grateful he even gave her phone back and playfully asking if she wants him to take it away again. As they walk down the stairs together, Hana voices her concern about how they look, worried that others might get the wrong idea. Her fears prove true when they run into acquaintances who jokingly ask why she's so close to Julio. With a smirk, Hana quips that she's his captive, and he counters with a grin, saying letting her wander freely would be too dangerous for his men. Hana shifts her focus to Logan, questioning why all three of them are gathered here. Logan explains that Mr. Giulio Parenti had contacted them the previous day and admits his concern for her safety. In response, Hana proudly recounts how she put up a fierce fight, even managing to stab Giulio Parenti in the shoulder with a knife. Julio, ready to cut through the small talk, gets straight to the point. He asks if Hana Lee is the agent once known as one. Logan confirms that she used the alias in the past, but reassures him that she's no longer connected to the FBI. With that clarified, Julio decides Hana needs protection and assigns the task to Valentine's Day. Before anyone can act, Eunseong steps forward to volunteer. However, Hana objects fiercely, snatching Julio's drink from his hand and reminding him that this is her fight, not something to drag others into. Julio, unfazed, tries to take a sip from the glass now in her hand, only to have it shatter on the floor. Amused but firm, he concludes that assigning her a guard isn't worth the risk, even mobsters value their lives too much for that. Shifting his attention to Eunseong, Julio asks his name, confirms his recruitment, and pours him a drink with a sly grin. He watches closely as Eunseong downs it without hesitation. Hana feels a wave of relief as the cuffs are finally removed from her wrists and her belongings returned. She recalls Julio's warning to obey her guard if she wants to avoid being restrained again, and irritation flares as she finds him infuriatingly patronizing. Determined to stay calm, she inspects the phone he gave her, hoping for a message from her brother. Instead, she's met with a strange photo of her brother's feet, as if he'd accidentally captured the floor beneath him. Intrigued, she sketches the pattern from the image onto paper and quickly realizes the floor's design is anything but ordinary. As she studies the sketch, Eunseong enters the room and glances at her phone. Casually, he remarks that the image must be connected to Moon Shipping Company. Confused, Hana presses him for details, wondering how he could identify a company from a simple floor design. Eunseong clarifies that he wasn't focused on the floor but the logo visible in the photo. If the image is genuine, it suggests her brother might currently be trapped on a ship owned by Moon Shipping, a company controlled by Mujin Kong. Eunseong lifts her chin gently, observing her with quiet curiosity. He comments that she seems to have escaped a dangerous situation, admitting he wasn't sure she would after catching Parenti's attention. When she appears confused, he elaborates, explaining that people like her tend to provoke strong reactions from the Mafia. He goes on to describe Julio, the eldest son of the Parenti family, once a member of the GIS, now running his operations from a mansion in Sicily. His business focuses solely on legally manufactured drugs for medical purposes, yet he has an unusual sensitivity to women with black hair, a trait tied to his mother and his hatred for the Red Mafia. To complicate matters, the Asian woman married to the Red Mafia boss happens to be Julio's former lover. Hana, curious, asks if Julio's ex-lover is Sei Jang. Eunseong confirms, noting Hana's uncanny resemblance to her. The name sparks Hana's memory of Lorenzo's stern warning: she must never mention Sei Jang in Julio's presence. The Mafia's veiled threats still linger in her mind. Eunseong goes on to explain that Parenti has been invited to a party aboard one of Moon Shipping's opulent yachts, likely hosted by its CEO, Mujin Kong. Alarmed, Hana hurries to the pool area to find Parenti and confirm the invitation's authenticity. She pleads with him to take her along, revealing her suspicion that her brother, Dewey, is after Mujin Kong. While Dewey's motives are likely layered, she's certain one of them is tied to Kong impersonating Julio. She confronts the Mafia boss, demanding to know why he hadn't told her he already knew the identity of the impersonator. He then questions why she should expect him to report anything to her. In Korean, her frustration builds as she realizes he had kept this from her. She wonders how long he had intended to deceive her and if this was some form of revenge for her past betrayal when she stabbed him. Julio, unfazed, responds in Italian, suggesting she speaks English. Undeterred, Hana continues in Korean, challenging his authority and telling him to stop speaking Italian as well. Julio tells her she's getting too worked up, but Hana doesn't back down. She grabs him, her voice filled with threat as she warns that if that person harms her brother in any way, she'll take revenge, starting with the Italian mafia. She accuses him of being the one who dragged her brother into this mess. In a burst of frustration, she shoves him into the pool, ordering him to get out of her sight. But instead of falling back, Julio quickly grabs her hand, and the two tumble into the water together. Underwater, Julio gently caresses Hana and kisses her, leaving her confused. She wonders why he keeps acting this way and if he's taking out frustrations from his past relationship on her. But then, she feels her hand go limp and the ripples around them spread. Julio quickly pulls her out of the water, and she opens her eyes. She asks why he looks so upset, and he responds sharply that she crossed the line. Hana, unfazed, tells him he should get checked out at a hospital, suggesting he's confusing her with someone else. Just then, Eunseong rushes in, calling her name and kneeling beside her. He's shocked she ran off after telling him she was going to change. When she asks if he was looking for her, he admits with a hint of a smile that he missed her. Julio, however, shifts the focus back to the situation, wrapping his arm around her and asking if she really wants to attend the party. If so, he suggests she go as his date, a move that would allow her the freedom to do what she needs. He reassures her that few would be foolish enough to mess with his woman. Excited, Hana asks if this means she'll come with him, and Julio confirms, adding that he's suddenly feeling a bit under the weather and would appreciate her help since he's doing her a favor. Surprised, Hana asks if Julio is really feeling sick. She can hardly believe that someone like him could fall ill. Meanwhile, Eunseong, sensing the tension between them, quietly gets up and leaves. Julio informs Hana that they'll be leaving tomorrow, so she should be ready. When she asks where they're headed, he answers that, if he remembers correctly, she plans to attend a party. He adds, with a smirk, that he hopes she's not planning to show up looking like that. The next scene shifts to the mafia boss taking Hana shopping for the party. She picks out a skirt and top, deciding they'll do for the event. However, selecting clothes is easy for her. What she really needs is something that can conceal her weapons while giving her quick access to them. Julio appears behind her, whispering that she'd be better off going naked to the party. She fires back, joking that he must know she has a pretty banging body, so she'll look amazing in anything. She also grabs a pair of heels, but Julio is eager to leave. Though she protests that she's not done shopping, he firmly tells her not to even think about wearing the items she just picked. Hana smirks and informs him that no matter what she wears, it'll automatically look luxurious. Suddenly, Hana bolts from her seat and suggests they grab coffee together. Parenti agrees, but only if it's espresso. Once inside the coffee shop, he tells her that while this may seem lighthearted, she should be honest with him about what she wants. Hana senses that he's being unusually easy on her at the moment, so she decides to take advantage of the opportunity. She needs him. Julio points out that she doesn't seem scared of him. "Why would I be scared of you?" she replies, asking if he doesn't know what an orphanage is. His question about whether her parents passed away when she was young prompts her to reveal a painful truth. She never had parents. She and her brother were born in a motel, and the woman who gave birth to them couldn't bring herself to kill them, so she just abandoned them there and ran off. Since then, her twin brother has always been the most precious person in her life. Julio, contemplating her words, reflects that it's a stark contrast to his own siblings, who are constantly looking for opportunities to betray each other. Suddenly, he stands up and announces that everything is ready. Her clothes, shoes, accessories, and everything she'll need are prepared and waiting for her back at the villa. Confused, Hana asks what they've been doing this whole time. He smirks and clarifies that he never said they were going shopping. He only asked if she planned on showing up to the party looking a mess. Hana hisses in frustration, asking why he's been silently following her around this whole time. He casually explains that it was amusing and that he wanted some fresh air. Looking at her with a smirk, he adds that it also seemed like she was enjoying herself. Eunseong Yoo is on the phone, listening intently as the caller asks about his current situation. While speaking, he discreetly rifles through Hana's bag, reflecting on how the operation he set in motion has become far more complicated than he anticipated. He also confides in the caller about a colleague's reckless behavior, particularly mentioning the audacious use of Giulio Parenti's name. Eunseong assures the caller he will return the call soon, as he needs to investigate further. As he ponders, a question nags at him. Did Hana take the flip phone with her? It seemed like she was using it to track her brother's movements. Just as he's lost in thought, Hana enters the room, her eyes narrowing as she observes him. She wonders aloud if he's been waiting alone for the room's occupant to return or if he has ulterior motives. Eunseong gently strokes her hair, assuring her that he was simply waiting for her and nothing more. His curiosity piqued, he asks about her recent interaction with the mafia boss, clearly gauging her level of interest. Hana, caught off guard, asks if Parenti is his target and if that's why he volunteered to be her bodyguard. Eunseong downplays it, expressing his concern for her well-being and her tendency to rush into dangerous situations. He reminds her of his romantic interest in her, offering an alliance. He suggests she consider working with him, a fellow mercenary, rather than aligning herself with the dangerous mafia. Hana challenges Eunseong's argument, questioning whether mercenaries are any better than the mafia, given that they, too, resort to violence, theft, and betrayal. Eunseong counters by asserting that at least mercenaries don't treat people like trophies. He dismisses Parenti as a dilettante and a counterfeit, predicting that once Parenti gains control, he'll discard her without hesitation. Hana, sharing the grim truth of her brother's betrayal by his own agency and the lack of efforts to rescue him, wonders aloud who she can turn to for help. A hint of suspicion crosses her mind as she comments on Eunseong's extensive knowledge, which unsettles her. To test him further, she asks if he knows Mujin Kong. Eunseong cryptically replies that he does, but demands something in return. Hana, unwavering, moves closer to him, placing her hands on his shoulders. She warns him that she might save his life once, but sternly reminds him not to snoop through her things again, stressing that she doesn't trust him. In another scene, a tense dinner unfolds with Julio, filled with an awkward silence. Hana finally breaks the ice with a bold question, asking if he has poisoned their food. Julio, unfazed, challenges her to taste it and find out. Seizing the moment, Eunseong presses Julio for the reason behind their gathering, sensing there's a purpose behind their presence. After a pause, Julio reveals that their current activities are coming to an end and hints at their next destination, Macau. Hana leaps to her feet, shouting that they are not going anywhere. She demands to know if Giulio Parenti has forgotten why she came to Cambodia in the first place. Julio remains calm, explaining that a cruise ship has already left Cambodia and is headed for Macau, where the party he was invited to is taking place. Hana sighs in frustration, realizing she hadn't considered that he might leave the country. Julio then shares that after handling his business in Macau, he plans to return to Italy and won't be coming back to Cambodia. He hints that this could be their last dinner together. With a resigned expression, he raises his glass for a toast. In the next scene, the screech of a car's tires cuts through the night as it speeds toward its destination. Hana steps out and heads toward a building, prompting Eunseong to ask if she'll be all right on her own and whether she needs him to accompany her. She reassures him that she'll be fine and that it shouldn't take long. Giving him a quick look, she adds that if she's not back in 10 minutes, he should probably come find her, and the same goes for Lorenzo. Before leaving Cambodia, Hana wants to take stock of everything that has happened. The fact that her brother, Dui, has managed to hide himself so completely suggests he must have help. She suspects they might have teamed up for an undercover investigation involving Giulio Parenti and Mujin Kong. There's one last place she needs to check, Taijun's house. Hana quietly sneaks up on him just as he finishes a phone call. Startled, he quickly asks how long she's been standing there, but she counters by asking if he's trying to run away. In a split second, he reaches for his gun, but to his surprise, Hana already has it in her hand. With the gun pointed at him, she questions why he's so jumpy, acting like he's done something wrong when, in fact, she's the one who should feel guilty. She reminds him that she stabbed him in the back years ago, but he dismisses it, saying he can't blame her for her actions, given she thought her brother was still alive. He urges her to put the gun down so they can talk. Hana cuts him off, demanding to know how long he plans to keep lying to her. She declares that her brother never had anything to do with Parenti, and what he said about mobsters assassinating him is pure nonsense. He challenges her, asking how she knows that, but she calmly reveals the truth. She knows the real imposter is Mujin Kong, the CEO of Moon Shipping Company. Hana makes it clear that this is his last chance to come clean, stepping closer and aiming the gun at his head. She accuses him of being the one who betrayed Dui. He scratches his neck nervously, still denying it and insisting that Dui was the one who betrayed them. Hana observes his tell. He scratches his neck when he lies, and she calls him out on it. With a cold, unwavering stare, she warns him that if he doesn't come clean now, she won't hesitate to assassinate him next time. The message is clear: if he decides to run, he'd better do it fast, because she won't let him escape again. The sound of a gunshot echoes through the building, prompting the neighbors who had heard it to rush into Taijun's apartment to investigate. As they burst through the door, they make a failed attempt to grab Hana, but her attention is elsewhere, her eyes locked on Taijun as he makes a swift escape. Meanwhile, outside, Lorenzo and Eunseong anxiously wait, their minds racing with worry. They're left in suspense, uncertain whether Hana has just murdered someone. Eunseong and Lorenzo rush into the apartment, only to be met with the sight of Hana sitting calmly on the floor, surrounded by the bodies of the men she's just killed. She looks up at them and, with a dry tone, tells them they're late. Meanwhile, Julio is on the phone, listening intently as the caller updates him on their investigation into Mujin Kong. The caller explains that despite their efforts, they've come up with very little information about Kong, with even the smallest photos being tightly guarded. Strangely, Mujin wasn't even in line for succession until a few years ago when his half-brother, Muho Kong, stepped down. The caller also notes that Julio has picked up an unusual ally in Hana Lee, referring to her as the Valentine's Day mercenary. He warns Julio to be cautious, reminding him of Hana's violent history, mentioning that she put Cyril in the hospital for a month and nearly assassinated Carlo. Julio, unfazed, reassures the caller that he and Hana are aligned now, both working toward the same goal. As the caller continues to escalate the conversation, Julio cuts him off, ending the call with a final, firm click. Lorenzo rushes Hana back to their place, shouting for a doctor even though she insists that the wound is nothing more than a graze. Inwardly, Hana reflects on her growing suspicions, realizing that she couldn't leave Cambodia without confirming certain things for herself. She still struggles to accept that Taijun might have actually betrayed her brother, Dui. She had planned to give him the benefit of the doubt, but when he ran, any trust she had left quickly dissolved. Moments later, Julio enters with a first aid kit, shutting the door behind him. He reminds her of the hour she requested, then questions if returning in such a bloody state was part of her plan. As he opens the kit, he pulls out an antibiotic and prepares to administer it to her. He warns her that after this, he'll apply a local anesthetic, ensuring she doesn't walk around with traces of others on her. He adds, with a hint of irritation, that he'd be even more upset if she returned covered in dead men's blood. Hana, quietly contemplating, wonders if there's a way to use this moment to tempt him, even just a little. As Julio finishes treating her cuts, he rises from his seat and unexpectedly shoves his finger into her mouth. He coldly tells her that he's going to help her find her brother in Macau, but once she finds him, she should go straight back to Korea. Hana, reflecting on the situation, realizes that with Taijun's betrayal now confirmed, Parenti is the only asset she has left. He is the one man who has consistently hurt her yet also cannot stand to see her suffer. Suddenly, the chair creaks beneath her, and as she loses her balance, her hand instinctively reaches out to grab hold of him. This unexpected contact sparks a passionate kiss between them. Julio hoists her onto the bed, their kiss deepening as they both become consumed by the moment. As their lips meet, Hana's thoughts shift to the future. She knows she will have to leverage Julio even more than before, using him as her tool to secure her brother's safety. But there's a lingering question in her mind: is he a lifeline, or just a tattered rope leading her further into ruin?